Good afternoon. My name is Avodia Wally, Vice President of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Contra Costa County, and I'm out here with Lamar Thorpe, who is running for City Council in Antioch. Now, Lamar Thorpe has also been on the Antioch Economic Development Commission. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so he's out here to share with us a little bit about what he's got in mind in terms of his campaign, where he'd like to see the city of Antioch go, and what his particular contribution is to the city of Antioch. Lamar, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my wife and I moved to Antioch a few years ago, and we absolutely fell in love with Antioch. We decided to move there because our daughter was growing up; she was going to start school, and we wanted her to be raised in a community that was diverse and more importantly, integrated. And so we didn't want to live in a community where Latinos lived on one part of town, African Americans lived in another part of town, and Asians lived in another part of town. We absolutely fell in love with the integration that you see in Antioch, and so we felt that was very important for her. But we also understood that there were challenges moving to Antioch. We knew that there was an issue with crime. We knew that there was an issue with the quality of the public schools. We knew that there was an issue with stagnant business growth. And so we knew that by moving there, we were taking on the responsibility to be involved. And so literally, the moment we moved in, we were out helping folks get elected to local office. I was appointed to the Antioch Economic Development Commission. I served on Rotary, and I also got involved with a group, an activist group called the Friday Morning Breakfast Club. And my wife has been absolutely involved as well, particularly with the public schools and the LCAP funding model, the new LCAP funding model from the state. So those are some of the ways we've been involved. Part of the success that we've been having has been, of course, at the advocacy level. At Antioch High School, we were able to implement a women's empowerment group. I designed what we called listening circles, and today we're implementing this program at our middle schools. And I'm proud of my academic background, having earned a master's in women's studies, to have been able to help impact our community in that way. That I was actually able to put my very expensive education from George Washington University to work. So we've been involved. We're absolutely in love with Antioch, but we understand that there's challenges, and we have to be involved in order to help shape the future direction of our community.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, that's certainly a very cohesive response there in terms of who you are and what your particular contribution is. So now, women certainly being a very important segment of the Contra Costa community, and in some cases kind of considered sort of like a minority group. Tell us more about what you have in store, for that particular constituency. Like, what would you like to see changed?
Well, a lot. When I set out on my campaign, I put out a video that we put out on Facebook, and we specifically targeted women in Antioch. And the overwhelming response from women, as I was asking about whether or not I should run for local office, and if I do, what position, was, of course, City Council. But number two was that a lot of mothers do not feel safe in Antioch. They don't feel safe allowing their children to play outside. They don't feel safe sending their children to some of our middle schools and high schools. We've seen a mass exodus of students from Antioch High School heading over to the Brentwood area and Oakley as well. So we need to make sure that mothers feel safe in Antioch, and that they feel not only safe for themselves but safe for their children. And so we got to make sure that we increase the number of police officers on our street. We got to make sure that the Measure C money that we passed a few years ago, that we trusted the City Council with, goes directly to hiring more police officers and putting more boots on the ground, because that's what we need. But more importantly, we also have to assist our police officers, not just through Neighborhood Watch, but by coming up with policy proposals at the City Council level that assist them. For example, I think we should empower residents to petition government to have a parking permit program. If you know that there's drug activity or that there's a drug house on your street and it's going to take a while before law enforcement takes initiative, then it's important for citizens to have some level of control. If they're seeing cars that shouldn't be there, or people coming into their community who should not be there, creating problems, that we need to create barriers so that folks who are bringing problems to our community, it's not so easy to bring those problems. So parking permit programs, overnight restrictions with parking are critically important in that effort. We also need to build up our code enforcement division to ensure that the blight that we're seeing, that makes a lot of mothers feel unsafe because they don't want to live next door or two doors down from a rundown home that potentially has has drug activity or folks living in it who shouldn't be living there. And so those are the types of opportunities we can give to our residents, and that's for everybody, but the chief concern that's come from has been mothers in our community.
Well, that's certainly, that's a very interesting perspective that we have there, kind of using the comfort of women as a sort of barometer to, gauge how well you're doing in terms of impacting the community in a really positive way and making it a hospitable place,
right.
Hospitable place for everybody. So now, what other business regulatory issues are you seeing that are, essential to drive some more positive impact in to have all this actually work?
Well, another chief challenge that we have, and it also, interestingly enough, surrounds women again, is that we have a jobs and housing imbalance in Antioch. Mm-hmm. And so many of the jobs that we have seen being created and allowed to come to Antioch as a result of decisions by our city council has been low-wage jobs. And, it breaks my heart when I see a woman working at McDonald's, and then later in the evening you see her working at one of the dollar stores, and then earlier in the day you saw her drop off 2 kids at her school. To me, that's just, I don't like it. I absolutely do not like it. So we have to fight to ensure that we're bringing the right types of jobs to Antioch. And so that means we have to create a climate for the business sector to want to come to Antioch. Right now, we have a lot of restrictions that make it difficult for the business sector to want to come to Antioch. One of those, I think, is that the city isn't willing to invest in itself. We have a beautiful downtown with riverfronts, but unless we're willing to make the types of investments that are going to attract the private sector, it's never going to happen. Mm-hmm. So that means we have to think about civic auditoriums. We have to think about public parks and public spaces, or a plaza like Todos Santos Plaza here in Concord. We have to think about those things and be willing to make the investments in order to attract the business sector to our community, so that we're bringing high-paying jobs for a lot of those, whether they're single or married women or whatever it may be, are working low-wage jobs, and we got to make sure. We end up subsidizing that. We end up subsidizing
taxpayers
as taxpayers, because it's those individuals who find themselves on the needing assistance from the government. And so I think businesses who are going to take care of their employees, give them good wages, give them good benefits so that they can take care of their families, are the types of businesses we want to see in Antioch.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So certainly you've identified some areas within the city government that could use a little bit of optimizing. So
right.
What particular skill set do you bring to the table that you think could kind of bring in the new blood to sort of help make things go a little bit more smoothly?
Well, since I graduated undergrad, I've been in higher education administrator. I served as a executive team member for San Jose Evergreen Community College District down in San Jose. So I bring an executive level perspective when it comes to our city. So that means we're not just looking at one thing, we're looking at how one decision impacts everything. And so that type of executive leadership, I think, is critical. I also believe that I personally bring strong negotiation skills, because part of my profession is fundraising. And so I'm not talking about the Girl Scout cookies fundraising. I'm in executive fundraising, and so we're dealing with folks' estates. We're dealing with multi-million dollar gifts at the university level, at the community college level. When I worked at San Jose State. So that type of level of negotiation, I think, is critical for City Hall, so that we're not getting, so that we can get rid of the mentality that we've had for a long time, and that's the poor man's mentality. If we don't take this, then what else will we have? Well, sometimes you have to be patient and you have to wait, and so we're not going to starve to death. So we have to be a little more patient and more thoughtful in how we recruit those high wage jobs that I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic, and certainly we all know that the Girl Scouts out there do a fantastic job here.
They do an excellent job. I did not say that to bring down our Girl Scouts. I said that to differentiate the level of fundraising.
Mr. Thorpe does not have you don't have the same cuteness as a Girl Scout.
No, I don't.
He's in a different league here. So
I really have to work hard for those gifts.
So you're in a different league, understood, sir. So now, as you're going to go into this this new mode here of like a city council, like policy making and such, what are some of the first initiatives that you'd like to see, kind of elevated to the top of the priority queue?
Accountability is critically important. And so we're getting far, far away from average citizens being able to access their government, and I don't think that's right. I served 8 years in the military, and it wasn't to serve a few individuals who can pour lots of money into campaigns. It was to serve everybody in our country. And so I want to see campaign finance reform. I want to make sure we limit it. And actually, I've had the opportunity to look at Concord's campaign finance rules, and they would be a great model and a great framework that we can work with in Antioch. We also need to move from electing our city council from at-large to single districts so that we're giving equal and proportional representation throughout the city. Or it could be a mix. It could be proportional and at-large, but we have to look at something that makes sure that our citizens in North Antioch in particular have representation on the city hall. Currently, everyone in City Hall lives in South Antioch, and I don't think that's right. Some of our largest population of Latinos live in North Antioch. And we got to make sure that they have representation. Some of our older residents in Antioch live in North Antioch, and some of our residents, a lot of our residents who are generational, have been in Antioch for 100 years, live in North Antioch, and those groups feel that they're not represented by City Hall because many of us are transplants. Many of us on the city council are transplants. And so we got to make sure that everyone's voice is heard equally, and I think we can achieve that by having proportional representation on our city hall.
Well, that's certainly going to be a very welcomed approach. So now going into this prioritization effort, now clearly getting the voice of the community is certainly very key. Now as far as your vision for the city, are there any particular regulatory business items that you'd like to see done first as far as?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to, we do offer tax incentives. I think we need to publicize those tax incentives. We need to come up with a concrete plan. And Dublin, Pleasanton, Livermore, they do a very good job of the types of tax incentives that they offer businesses to come move into their to their community. So we need to look at that. We also need to look at incentivizing better current businesses who are in Antioch to move away from the strip mall mentality and move into downtown, because that's where the greatest need economically but more importantly, it's the greatest need for the city because the city wants to have a vibrant downtown. And so if you got to go to this one shopping plaza that's run down over here, and then you got to run over to the other side of town to go to the other rundown shopping plaza, let's try to concentrate that type of business growth in downtown. So I think we can come up with incentives that way. The reality in terms of attracting business to our community is going to be our workforce, and is it talented? I think the answer is yes. A lot of Latinos and a lot of African Americans who live in Antioch have advanced degrees. A lot of them have master's degrees when you look at South Antioch. So we have that. The question is quality of life. And so how do we then get just beyond young families who are starting to build and getting that young single guy who's out in San Francisco went as far as Concord because he needs access to BART. Those are the kinds of individuals we need to attract, and we can't compete with Concord or Walnut Creek when our downtown looks the way it does, when we're not offering the kinds of amenities that Concord and Walnut Creek, or even Brentwood for that matter, offer. So we got to get better at increasing and adding more value to our quality of life in Antioch so that we can attract the type of businesses that we need out there.
Fantastic. Any particular businesses that you'd like to see come over? I mean, is there any low-hanging fruit there that we need to go after?
There's always the question of, I think the easiest is, of course, looking at what's down in the Bay Area, what's down in the peninsula, what's down in San Francisco, San Jose, in which people can reduce their costs by moving back office operations into the suburbs. So we can look at that. At the end of the day, I think it's going to have to be more of a collective community effort to figure out what type of industry we want to see in our community and what type of business. I don't think it's up to one individual, but those are the opportunities I think that exist that can come out here. So it can't just be developing housing, although we need housing, but we need to balance the housing with the business growth. So there's plenty of industry. It's just a matter of what makes most sense. I think the fastest for us would probably be looking at back office support.
So now clearly, sustainability is obviously a very big, important objective for you. So are there any other things that you see could help us improve the sustainability of the city? I don't know, whatever issue, like cutting down on crime or improving education, even though we may have things under control, is there something that you'd like to see improved upon? And can you share with us any metrics or any success metric that you see we need to try to hit in terms of, you mentioned police officers. Is there a certain number that we need, or
the number right now that we've all agreed to, and that was because the city council promised us 102 police officers on the street. We have not achieved that yet, and that's a result of attrition. So we hire some, and then some retire, some leave, and so we've had a difficult time doing that. So I recognize that that's a human resources issue, and so if we need to hire temporary human resources professionals to help us recruit, onboard, and then retire police officers, then we need to do that. But we have to figure out a way to beat attrition. So the 102 is the number we've all kind of agreed on. I don't think it's going to be the number that we need in order to, particularly in a city of 100, who knows how many thousand people, that we really need to really keep crime at the levels that we need them. Right now, violent crime seems to be up, and so that's a huge issue that we're dealing with. And I'm sure there isn't a time on the local news that you don't turn it on, you hear about another shooting in Antioch, particularly. And so we have to drive those numbers down as best as we can. From my perspective, the best way to drive down crime is not just having more police officers, is having more economic activity. And so what works best, what keeps people safe in Todos Santos Plaza is that there's activity going on, that there are people out there who feel safe. And so when you do that, that seems to keep people who shouldn't be around from coming around. So that's the metric that I would look at for the police officers. But at the end of the day, as I say in Spanish, la gente manda. And so if the people want to see more police officers, well, then we need to listen to what they're asking for. And so that's one of those metrics. I think in terms of, we need to look at the metrics of the jobs and housing imbalance. I don't know what that number is going to be, because it's very fluid, because you could look at Mountain View, but then a city next door to it, the difference can be stark, because it's just a suburban community in the middle of Silicon Valley. So, but when you look at Mountain View, well, there's industry there. So is it fair to compare? So we have to come up with numbers that make sense for Antioch, and quite frankly for the region as well. So we can't just look at it in isolation. It has to be in working with the entire region.
So earlier you mentioned that the city doesn't like to invest in itself, or I guess there's an issue with the city somehow identifying needs and then applying resources to them. Can you help us understand what you feel needs to be improved in terms of getting that cyclical renewal, so that we can identify problems and then prioritize them and get the resources applied so that we get solutions? So
right, and when I say city, I say that fluidly, because sometimes I mean everybody in the city, and sometimes I'm specifically talking about the city council.
Sure.
And so as a city, I think, no one's made a case to the city about the importance of, for example, looking at our city hall and thinking, how can we rethink this so that it's not just a city hall where where official work takes place, but that we think of it like Brentwood has, where they've come up with the city hall, a civic auditorium right next to their downtown, so it helps galvanize and bring people together. So from my perspective, I don't think we've done enough of that. I don't think we've asked taxpayers to say, we really should invest in ourselves, and I think we need to pass a bond measure to make this happen. But what we are good at, and what the politicians are very good at, is harping on your fears and saying, well, if you want more police and you want the crime to go down, then you have to give us more money specifically for police officers. And I'm all for that. But we have to then look at other issues exactly the same way. And I know it's easier to ask for money for police officers than it is to build a new building, but we have to do it, and we have to have the political courage to do so, or else the people you represent on the Chamber of Commerce will never come to Antioch. And that, to me, is what is at stake.
Interesting. So it sounds like with the help of the community and a bit of engagement and efficient policy making, you feel that you're going to be impactful in this new role. And you mentioned that your experience and your background kind of makes you the man for the job. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about some of the hard skills that you bring to the table in terms of helping to make this, policy making process go more smoothly?
Well, yes, there are certain things that I value, and one of those values is community building. And so one of the reasons I've stayed in higher education is because I appreciate the process of shared governance. And it's not an easy process. It can be an ugly process. But at the end of the day, being able to bring people's perspectives, being able to have different governing groups at the table making budget decisions, making curriculum decisions, whatever it may be. Whether it's our faculty, our classified staff, whether it's administrators, whether it's our board of trustees, whether et cetera, et cetera. I value that, and so I value that. To me, that's an important skill set to have, the opportunity to have collaboration. And so I don't look at collaboration as a dog and pony show where I come and sit you down, get you to give me feedback, and then I still go do what I had initially intended to do. That's a dog and pony show. I want to see our budget process be more inclusive of the community. I want it to go through the community, through some kind of community review board or opportunity or forum before the budget gets to the city council, so that we have genuine input in the budgeting process. So I'd like to see more of those types of, and maybe, I don't know if, maybe those are more values, but I look at them as hard skills, because not everyone can do that, and not everyone has the patience to do that. And I understand it's not an easy process, but it's an inclusive process, and the community has to feel that this is their government and that this is their community, and that they're helping shape that process. And so those skills that I come with from higher education, I think are going to, if I get elected, you're going to see them on the Antioch City Council, and hopefully being able to permeate that through City Hall. But right now we'll come up with the ideas in City Hall, and we'll try to sell it to the community, and that's not how things work.
Well, I would certainly attest to the fact that those soft skills can certainly play a very significant role in terms of being perceived as hard skills. So now, speaking of kind of hard skills, I kind of detect a little bit of a Latin accent there. You've got a pretty good command of the Spanish language, somewhere in there. So share with us a little bit about that. Right.
Yeah. Well, no, that's my first language. My mom is from Guadalajara. She's about an hour and a half outside of Guadalajara, northeast, in a small town called Cañadas de Obregón.
All right.
So that's where she was born and raised. And my dad is from Juárez, Chihuahua. He has a house out there. We spent a lot of summers down there. So and we did in Guadalajara as well. So that's I grew up in East Los Angeles, and so I learned English in school. So.
So with a little bit of that Latin, and is there another ethnicity mixed in there? Are you just a straight up Mexican?
Well, I like to say I'm a straight up Mexican.
Yeah, is that right?
I do, and that's because, again, both my parents are from Mexico. But what I think, and I have to point out that the first slaves that came to the Americas came to Mexico. Before they came to the United States, before they even went down south to the Caribbean, they were in Mexico. That was the first slave system that they tried, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
And so the slavery in Mexico didn't last very long for Africans. But those Africans are still in Mexico.
Sure.
You'll find them in Acapulco, and you'll find them in La Costa Chica. So you have a lot of Africans in Mexico.
Well, there it is, right there. I mean, so you see yourself first and foremost Latino, basically.
Orgullosamente.
So certainly, I can attest to that part of just the big melting pot that we've had over in Mexico, just as we do have here in America. And so to that point, these interviews are brought to you by the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Contra Costa County Government Affairs. We are a nonpartisan organization within the Hispanic Chamber, and we are officially a 501c4. That's also part of the kind of the triad of entities that comprise the chamber. We are doing these interviews to help basically get the candidates' messages out there and make sure that the constituents of Contra Costa County, in particular the ones in Antioch, have a chance to get the kind of the perspective, of what's in the minds and hearts of these candidates that are coming out here. And as Mr. Thorpe here has shared with you, he feels like he's got a lot of hard and soft skills to bring to the table. So I'd like to thank you for coming out here,
Thank you
sir,
for having
and
me.
sharing
Thank
your
you.
perspective with us.
Thank you. Thank you.